There's no doubt that Britain is a nation of very proud gardeners.
Our love of flowers and plants goes back centuries.
But there's a problem. Not everything is rosy in our gardens.
Our iconic plants are under attack from foreign invaders.
Ancient woodlands are at risk of being lost forever.
And our favourite flowers are disappearing right before our eyes.
So we need you to help us in our revival campaign.
We'll be inspiring you to dig deep and celebrate the best of British.
As we reveal the country's most stunning gardens.
And sharing our top gardening tips.
It's time to rediscover our passion for plants.
And breathe new life into our gardens. We've been told for decades now that we all need to take responsibility for looking after the planet. And yet, one of the biggest tools we have to ensure a greener future is often overlooked. And it's right on our doorstep, the back garden. In our manic desire for ever increasingly low maintenance plots, we've chopped down trees, we've dug up borders and we've decked over lawns, when in fact, we should be viewing our gardens as the biggest nature reserves we have in the country. On my revival, I'm finding out how simple wildlife gardening can be.
The way we're talking about it sounds like you've got to have all this knowledge and do all these things. You don't.
By learning how to choose nature over pesticides.
Encouraging beneficial insects in becomes easier than going for the zapper.
And planting beautiful flowers for our precious pollinators. Really my favourite wildflower. These are cornflowers. You know, that really beautiful, bright blue flower that just looks fantastic in a meadow. This is the University of Bristol Botanic Garden, set on 4 wonderful acres on the edge of the city. It's buzzing with life, with bees and butterflies searching for nectar. There's a symphony of birds, and even the pond is teeming with frogs. This environment is a shining example of what I like to call a wildlife garden. A garden with trees, shrubs and flowering plants that attract all manner of creatures and creepy crawlies. As gardeners, we have this instinct to take land, to tame it, and to produce something that's beautiful and bountiful. But we should be doing this in harmony with nature. Over the past 30 years, intensive agriculture, industry, and habitat laws have resulted in a sharp decline in much of our native wildlife. From butterflies to bees, from blue tits to newts. And it's time we turn this around, starting in our own gardens. If we just make some choices about what we plant, we can still create plots that are teeming with wildlife, but have gardens that we're really proud of. To understand just how important our gardens are to Britain's wildlife population, I'm visiting the Old Moor Nature Reserve in Yorkshire. This was once a barren land owing to the nearby coal industry, but through regeneration has become a haven for all kinds of creatures. Or as PB conservationist Matthew Capper knows just how important our gardens are to great British wildlife. This is an amazing project, but how does it relate to my garden back home?
All of our nation's gardens collectively is a bigger land area than all of our nature reserves put together.
And you reckon you and me can do something about it back home?
Anybody can do something about it, absolutely. There are simple things that we can do that will make a massive difference.
Here at Old Moor, they've created a wildlife garden that demonstrates some important factors that we should all consider at home. So what are the 3 main areas that we need to consider when we're attracting wildlife?
They need food, they need shelter, they need somewhere to live, and they need water. It doesn't have to be a big pond. Ponds are nice, but we've just put a Belfast sink here. It sounds really complex, doesn't it? The way we're talking about it sounds like you've got to have all this knowledge and do all these things. You don't. It only needs to be one thing, each household. Because if you've got a nest box in your garden, and next door's got a cotoneaster or, you know, a hawthorn in theirs, and next door's got a bird table, you know, all those things collectively, that's the collective habitat.
And it builds up this wildlife neighbourhood, doesn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely, perfectly put.
Amazing.
One common misconception about creating a wildlife garden is that it has to be wild and unkempt, but this simply is not the case.
Ken.
Hi there.
Dr. Ken Thompson is a plant biologist from Sheffield University whose back garden encourages wildlife to thrive whilst maintaining a beautiful and tidy appearance.
I love the garden, Ken. Absolutely love it. To many people, this would be their ideal retreat, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it's very nice, very quiet, very relaxing.
So you've created pretty much a full ecosystem here. You've introduced cover, be it in trees, shrubs. You have open spaces, you have shade spaces, there's probably dry areas and every condition, really, that we like to grow in.
That's one of the things that makes gardens so good for wildlife, the fact that they pack all this variety. There's no natural habitat that provides that variety on this small scale. But the really crucial thing that you need for lots of wildlife in a garden is lots of big woody plants. Hedges, shrubs, trees. The more of those you have, the more wildlife you have.
Woody plants like these beech hedges don't just provide cover for creatures in a wildlife neighbourhood.
If you look at gardens, if you can imagine a sort of aerial view of gardens, they actually don't exist in isolation. And as far as the wildlife in your garden is concerned, as long as they can get from one to the other, as long as you have nice permeable boundaries like these hedges here, they don't care.
Along with half the country, my fences were blown down this past winter. And coming into your garden today, I've decided what I'm going to do is to grow a holly and beech hedge, because that's not going to happen again.
It's cheaper, it'll last forever, it'll never blow down.
Providing a regular supply of pollen and nectar is a surefire way of attracting pollinators to your garden, and that's exactly what they're doing here at Bristol University Botanic Gardens. For instance, this clump of honesty is perfect for attracting nocturnal insects such as moths, and the flowering kale over here is packed with nectar, which makes it absolutely seductive for bees.
Wildflowers are great for our precious pollinators, and I'm going to show you how to create a wonderful patch in your garden.
What I'm going to do is take a little patch of garden in an open sunny position and plant some wildflower seeds. The first job is to clear the patch of ground of any weeds. In particular, look out for perennial weeds with big roots. Just dig down maybe a couple of weeks before you sow the seed.
Perennial weeds like dandelions and ground elder are common and can thrive in your garden year after year. If you don't want them competing with your wildflowers, you need to make sure that you remove their roots completely.
The soil that we have here is relatively free draining, but it is quite stony. Now that won't be an issue for the type of gardening that we're doing.
Wildflowers flourish easily in stony earth, and by gently tilling the soil with a rake, you can create the perfect bed for your seeds.
I've chosen 3 of my favourite wildflowers for this small patch. I'm going to start off with these poached eggplant. Now they look exactly as you'd imagine, like a poached egg, yellow in the centre and a white veil all the way around. They're great for attracting hoverflies, which of course will eat the aphids that are attacking so many other things in the garden.
Sprinkle your seeds over the rake soil without worrying too much about where they land.
After that, really my favourite wildflower. These are cornflowers. You know, that really beautiful, bright blue flower that just looks fantastic in a meadow. In the countryside, they're a little bit in danger, so isn't it lovely to encourage them into our own gardens? And finally, I've poppy seeds here. Now, those produce these long, hairy stems, and on the top of them will be these beacons of red. And to spread them evenly can be a bit tricky, so just be a little bit careful. And right the way around the patch, let them fall into the ground.
Although poppies only flower for a short period, they produce a huge amount of edible pollen, which is a favourite of both bumblebees and honeybees. And if you fancy a bit of potluck, there's another way to achieve a fantastic wildflower patch.
If you want, you can just get wildflower mixes, and you never know what you'll find in here. There could be some orchids, red campion, all sorts, and the excitement of waiting to see what shows up out of the ground is great. You can sow wildflower seeds really at any time of the year except in deepest winter. In a matter of 6 or 8 weeks, these will be jumping out of the ground and creating a wonderful and colourful display, both for us and for the wildlife.
Creating habitats to attract wildlife is essential for promoting a balanced ecosystem, which in turn will make for healthy plants in your garden without the need for pesticides and chemical fertilizers. This is exactly what Malcolm Mullard has achieved here in one of the UK's only chemical-free community wildlife allotments.
Now, what really strikes Malk is that all of this gardening is done organically. Everybody has signed up to the notion of working with nature.
That's right.
It's very difficult in an allotment.
But what's happened is, as the wildlife has come in, people are seeing the work being done for them. So, for example, a girl, Tracy, over there had a terrible trouble with blackfly on her broad beans, but within about an hour, she had an invasion of ladybirds from the insect homes close by and wiped the whole lot out. I would say now, if you rely on encouraging beneficial insects in, they do the work for you, so it becomes easier than going for the zapper.
Each of the 68 allotments here in Shropshire are producing all manner of fruit and vegetables organically, and although harvest is a little way off yet, I can already see crops peeking through the earth. This is all made possible by specially designed habitats that surround the plots, which house a diverse array of crop-friendly creatures, and Malcolm is going to show me how it works.
On one side of the pathway you have the typical allotment, but everywhere else you look there are little habitats. What are this pile of old paving stones?
Yes, that's a pile of broken paving stones from when someone had a new patio made at home, and we've made a little dry stone wall, and that attracts beetles.
Why are beetles important?
They are prey insects, and they'll be after some of the bugs that will be spoiling our vegetables and fruit.
It's great fun apart from anything else.
All of these man-made habitats are set amongst some very well-considered planting.
So this area is the winter garden?
Yes.
And what does that mean?
This area has got plants in it that predominantly look good in the winter, but we make sure it looks good all year round.
So we have things like the hellebores and the carex, which will be flowering in the winter, and the myosotis and...
Yeah, and coloured stems of the dogwoods and willows.
Right. It's very nice, isn't it?
See, that's got insects on it, little flies.
By encouraging predatory and pollinating insects to the site all year round, Malcolm and his fellow gardeners are working in harmony with nature.
The other amazing thing is all the bird sounds.
Yes, we bring in by having nest boxes and natural hedges, ornamental trees around the site that will bring the birds in, so there's somewhere for them to nest, someone for there to shelter and food right throughout the year. And behind us there we've got a turf spiral with its a texture totem pole in the middle. One of the main purposes of that is it brings voles in, and they come out and they eat slugs.
This balanced ecosystem doesn't just unite wildlife, it also created a close-knit community of all ages that embrace organic gardening with a passion. And they love to get together to taste their chemical-free bounty.
Got the fennel?
Yeah.
Which has a great licorice scent. And what's this, marjoram?
Marjoram, yeah.
So these are all wonderful for wildlife gardens because I suppose they'll all produce flowers.
They all produce flowers, which brings in the bees and the butterflies and the hoverflies.
And do you think what you're doing here should be a beacon to the gardeners of the rest of the country, whether it's on allotments or in their own back gardens?
I think we're trying to encourage the youngsters on the allotment. We've got quite a few young families, so if we can sort of encourage them, show them and let them see and understand what we're doing, hopefully they will be the gardeners of tomorrow.
These guys are true champions of my revival.
Oh, that's delicious.
Just imagine if we all took a leaf out of their book and started gardening in harmony with nature. we could restore wildlife populations to our green and pleasant land and enjoy some healthy and delicious food.
Coming to this allotment and meeting people with a passion for gardening, along with nature, has been absolutely inspiring.
To achieve a balance in your garden's ecology, you really do need to invite the whole food chain. Here at the University of Bristol Botanic Gardens, there are some ingenious methods of enticing all manner of wildlife, and I'm going to show you some simple ideas that will work a treat in your garden.
As homemakers, housekeepers and gardeners, we've kind of evolved into a species that expects things to be neat and tidy inside and out. It's not the way it is with nature, and it's not the way it should be. Having an area of the garden like this, just a few pieces of rotting, decomposing wood, is very important for a healthy ecosystem.
If you don't have room for a pile of logs, just avoid sweeping up dead leaves, as they will also be decomposed by your creepy crawlies. And they, in turn, will become food for another important garden inhabitant that you can invite with the right plants.
Trees, shrubs and hedges provide great nesting opportunities for birds. Take this holly behind me. It's perfect. It's evergreen, so there's cover all year round. Later in the year, there's berries for food. And with those prickly leaves, there's protection from predators.
Birds like all sorts of different plants. Sunflowers look great, and their seeds are a real avian treat. Or why not plant a delightfully scented honeysuckle? Yew hedges work really well, providing shelter and nesting opportunities. And a crabapple tree is sure to attract robins with a fruit crop that can last throughout the winter.
If you don't have room for big trees in your garden, but you still want to encourage birds to nest, well, give them a little bit of a helping hand. How about this cute little nesting box? This one has a large opening, which makes it perfect for species such as robins and wrens. And the thing about those birds is that you don't have to put the house on a wall too high. They like to be just above eye level. I'm putting this behind an evergreen shrub, an Eleagnus. But it's not only birds that need a helping hand. How about this bat roosting box? This similarly is perfect for them. They enter up this way, and if you put it high up in a tree, they could be adding to the biodiversity in your garden.
To help these endangered winged mammals, incorporate night-scented plants into your garden, such as evening primrose, that will attract moths, a favourite delicacy of the bat. Recent years have shown that our bee population is in shocking decline. Bees are integral to our ecosystem, and their disappearance would result in a loss of a huge range of plant life that rely on them for pollination. We can all help to turn this around by planting pollen and nectar-rich flowers to bring back the bee to Britain.
Hi, Jez.
I've come to South Yorkshire to meet Jez Daughtry, who, after 20 years in IT, has quit the rat race to become a champion of the honeybee.
We hear stories all the time that they're in decline. What's your take on that?
Bees need certain good sorts of flowers and nectar and pollen, and I think the more we can do to help bees that way, that's the way forward. Just spend a few pounds on a packet of seeds, everyone can make a difference that way.
And do you do anything like that? Do you sow seeds? Or?
Back in my truck we've got a big bag of 5 kilos of borage seed, and we scatter it everywhere, literally.
Without telling anyone?
Without telling anybody.
Jez is a true guerrilla gardener, and although I'm a bit wary of bee stings, I feel compelled to lend a hand in moving a hive.
How many times do you get stung a day?
Myself, 20 to 30 times.
I'm not happy.
So what we're going to do is close the entrance on here.
Jez moves his bees to various locations so they can gather nectar and pollen from different species of flowers. And there's a very good reason for this.
One of the ideas was to create bespoke honeys, the idea of creating a honey from a specific plant. So we take the bees to the heather moors, produces a heather crop. We take the bees to the borage plants in North Lincolnshire, produces a borage honey. Every single hive will have a distinct and unique honey, different flavour.
But before I get to taste this bespoke honey, there's still work to be done.
This is a new block of flats. Or a new factory?
This is a new factory.
Okay.
We're upgrading, that's what we're doing.
Right.
Pair of gloves.
Oh, they're not even real gloves?
Not even real gloves.
Did you go on any beekeeping courses? That's why you get stung.
This smoking device subdues the bees, so I'm hanging on to it for the scary bit.
So we take our roof off.
Okay.
If I lift this corner up,
yeah,
you could gently smoke inside. A bit more than that, over the frames themselves, just to push the bees down a little bit. That's perfect. So gently we're going to lift the frames out one by one.
Well, it's amazing to see, isn't it? This.
Can you see the honey here?
Yeah.
All this is honey.
Look at that. That's fantastic.
Nectar to become honey, and then you've got yellow, look at the dandelion pollen here.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
The most important part of the relocation is to find the queen bee and clip her wings before transferring to the new hive. This will discourage the queen from leaving her new home and keep Jez's honey flowing.
Are they going to get annoyed knowing that you have the queen?
No, they won't be aware of that difference at the moment. In about 10 minutes' time,
yeah,
they're going to know that she's missing.
Okay.
Apparently, it's my turn to get sticky hands, but I'm not sure that I'm particularly keen.
And then you're going to place it into the gaps in the hive itself. No sudden movements.
Now, I reckon out of that 10 minutes, you've got about 2 minutes left until these guys realise something has happened.
So you're going to brace yourself for this?
Yeah.
Okay, you want to stand back a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, what's a little bit? I think the best thing to do is... Tell me when it's over!
After my heroic attempts at beekeeping, it's time to take some of this bespoke honey to the people of Sheffield.
What we're doing here is trying to create an awareness of the different flavours of honey that are available just in this city by doing some honey tasting. And then, if people like what they taste, we're trying to encourage them to grow some of the plants that will result in these distinctive flavours.
I've brought along 3 different types of honey produced from flowers that any of us can grow in our gardens. One where the bees have fed from heather, 1 apple blossom, and 1 borage.
Definitely mild.
Definitely mild.
What do you think of
Flavour?
that? Yeah. Where do you think honey gets its flavour?
Flowers?
The beekeeper is growing this plant called comfrey, and that's what's given this its flavour.
Heather.
Heather. Isn't that amazing?
That shows you how ring-fingered I am, doesn't it?
Do you like it?
It's lovely.
That's nice. Very soft.
Feels as though it's just so good for you, really.
The honey is a hit, and I'm hoping that the people of Sheffield would support their local bees and plant some nectar-rich flowers.
All take a packet of seeds, and if you sow them in your garden or anywhere, in no time at all you'll have the bees come into your place.
In the sunshine, then will it go in shade?
Nice, open, sunny area.
Area.
Unless we have wildlife, we won't be able to produce honeys like this.
And the chap on next allotment's got a couple of hives.
He has hives on the allotment?
Yeah.
Fantastic. If he wants an expert beekeeper, now I'm not one for boasting or anything like that, but I'm pretty good.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye. Good morning, shoppers. Please join the Wildlife Garden Revival by planting wonderful pollinating plants in your garden, which will provide a great resource for all the bees and other insects in our back gardens, so that we can produce wonderful honey. Food and shelter are critical for wildlife, but nothing can exist without water. This large pool is teeming with wildlife, such as pond skaters, water beetles, newts and tadpoles. But if you don't have the space or the inclination to dig a pool, I've just a thing for you.
I'm going to show you how to make your very own mini water feature for your garden.
We start off with a container. I'm using a simple plastic container, so no need to seal up any holes. I'm going to add a whole system of plants here that will keep the water fresh without the need for any pumps or plumbing or electricity. So it's magic in a barrel.
By using upturned clay pots, you can create different levels on which you can place your plants.
The first one, a starwort, very interesting arrangement, star-like arrangement of foliage. And what this will do is, it's an oxygenator, so that's going to add oxygen to the water, and the foliage will float to the surface.
Once in position, it's time to add the next level.
And our big structural planting is this wonderful equisetum. Looks a little bit like rushes or bamboo, and also hosts lots of different insects. Dragonflies lay their larvae here, and those little insects eventually creep all the way to the top of these stems. In front of that, I'm going to, it's not exactly planting, I'm going to place one of these Carexes. Now, as you see, all these plants seem to be in pots, but they're in little baskets with holes right the way around the base and all along the side to allow for the exchange of water and the gases that will build up.
Next, I add some rocks building up to surface level. This creates a nice landing spot for my winged baiters.
Our main plant is going to be one of the stars of the show. This is a water lily, and again it's coming in a basket. Those leaves, which are at the moment lying rather limply, have a beautiful kind of ruby colour. And that, once I place it into the deepest area of the pot, those lily pads, upon the addition of water, will float to the surface.
Water lilies like this will not only offer a hiding place for creatures that live under the water, they also provide a perfect landing pad for dragonflies.
The best type of water to use isn't from your tap. Collect it when it rains in buckets or from the water butt at the end of the drain pipes.
It's important to add oxygenating plants to keep your water fresh. This one is called hornwort.
And it's a funny way we have of planting this. I'm just going to tie a little stone to it to weigh it down. It takes all its nutrients from the water and produces lots of oxygen to keep that water fresh. When you plant up this or any garden pond initially, you might find that some algae takes over, the water goes a bit greenish. It takes a while for the ecosystem to develop and all the workings of these plants to kick in. The only thing to do now is to sit back and enjoy it, and in no time at all it will become a habitat, a home to all sorts of pond life.
One common misconception is that to create a wildlife garden you need lots of space. But Keith Reynolds' inner city Manchester flat is proof that that's simply not true.
This is my balcony. As you can see, I've used lots and lots of galvanised metal buckets because these are the building blocks of the wildlife garden balcony. The buckets are really cheap to get. I just drilled holes in them and then filled them with peat-free compost and plants, which are fantastic for wildlife. When I look out and see around me in the inner city of Manchester all these blank, sterile balconies, I think it's a crying shame because people could be making them really green, they could be attracting lots of bees and butterflies with the right plants. They're missing out on an opportunity to actually sit out in their own balcony and have their own little piece of nature right on their doorstep.
Keith has employed some very inventive techniques to attract wildlife.
What we have here is my dustbin lid meadow. So what we've got now is white campion, which is great for bees, but also for moths at night because it has a night-scented flower. Here I've got a bucket pond, which, as you can see, is essentially a bucket that's been filled with water, and I've planted water bistle as well as yellow flag iris.
He's even started a blog to give advice to other inner-city wildlife enthusiasts.
I started the blog for my wildlife garden balcony approximately 4 years or so ago. It contained lots of details about what plants to choose, what containers to use, how to set up the right conditions so that your plants don't die, to hopefully inspiring people to see if I can do it, they can do it.
Being able to sit back and relax and enjoy the wildlife in your own garden is such a real treat. But our birds, bees and butterflies are under real threat. We can make a difference though if we provide some food, water and shelter for them, no matter how big our outdoor space. Your wildlife will be all the richer for that.
Across the series, our revival team are travelling the length and breadth of Britain, celebrating our gardens.
You couldn't draw, as a landscape artist, a more perfect picture.
Flowers.
Perfume. Oh, it's sensational.
And plants.
This plant is perfect. That's going to get off to a great start.
Next, Charlie to make campaigns to revive the peony.
Ask anyone what their favourite flower is and you'll probably get rose, daffodil or maybe even sweet pea. But there's one flower that doesn't appear very high on anyone's list. It's a really gorgeous flower that I feel has been somewhat neglected and overlooked by the British gardener. And that flower is the peony. Considered difficult to grow and with a short flowering period, we're simply not planting as many of them in our gardens. But if we don't, there's a chance that we might lose some of our more beautiful varieties. That's why I want to make it the star of the border again. On my revival campaign, I'll see just how versatile these stunning plants are. No one can say that there's not a peony for them.
I totally agree.
I take to the streets to ignite people's passion for peonies. What would be most romantic, getting peonies from Sir or roses? And I'll show you my top tips on how to establish peonies in your own garden. Just be patient. I promise you it's well worth the wait. This is the enchanting Kifsgate Court Gardens in Gloucestershire. The 7-acre garden is on the edge of the Cotswold Escarpment and has stunning views as far as the eye can see. In early summer, the borders are a blaze of colour, and it's the peonies that steal the show. Some people think peonies are old-fashioned and uncool, but I've always thought they're rather glamorous and romantic. There's nothing understated about the flowers, and no matter what border they're in, they'll always draw your attention. Whenever I see peonies, I get transported back to when I was a child. I've got lots of very happy, fond memories of helping my granddad, who was a gardener, in the garden. And I would be drawn to the peonies because they were so colourful and full on. And probably much to his irritation, I would go and collect the petals, even if they were still on the flower, and then distribute them round the lawn. But they are beautiful, and it takes me right back there every time I see them. To try and understand the decline of the peony, I've come to the West Country, the flower's spiritual home in Britain. Now, I think one of my biggest problems with the campaign is that people don't actually recognise peonies when they see them. Would you know what those flowers are? No. No? Would you know what these flowers are?
I have no idea what they are.
Coronation. Is it camellia?
They smell lovely, though. No eating them, darling.
My wife will kill me if she sees this because she's a florist.
Oh! It seems the poor peony is suffering a bit of an identity crisis. Yet it's here in Somerset where the flower was historically grown. Kelways is one of the UK's oldest plant nurseries, established in 1851 and named after its peony-loving owners. They helped spread the popularity of peonies as far as America and turn them into a bit of an Edwardian obsession. But as the craze for labour-intensive herbaceous borders diminished in the mid-1900s, the peony gradually fell out of favour across the country. I'm not the only one that thinks that peonies have got a bit of a raw deal and we've neglected them slightly in the garden. Mr. Kelway wrote in his garden peony book, "It seems to me surprising as well as unfortunate that the peony, one of the loveliest of all flowers and available to all, is not as widely known to the general public in Britain." But current owner Dave Root is determined to safeguard these historic peonies for the future. Using the nursery's original handwritten catalogue, Dave is attempting to identify all the peony varieties from the collection. so that he can replant them and preserve them for the future. I'm here to help relocate one of these original peonies.
We've got our what we call our Peony Bible here, which is our big stock list made by James Kelway back in the 1930s of all the peonies they've got in the collection. Occasionally a plant still comes up and flowers, which is actually not what it's supposed to be. I'm pretty convinced this is one called Bridal Veil, which I thought had actually been lost from our collection. So I'm really pleased that we've discovered it again.
Dave needs to dig up the peony so it can be moved to a different area where he's growing the new collection. There it can be labelled and catalogued. So when would you say the real big heyday of peonies was?
I think the heyday was at the end of the 19th century, which was the days of the great Victorian plant collectors and the big estates and the big gardens. And in those sort of times, everyone had the grand double herbaceous border, and peonies were an integral part of that. And it was said that the peonies were like the Victorian ladies of the day, with very thin necks and big hats.
Oh, okay, yeah, I can see that. So why did they go into decline then?
Yeah, well, it all changed about the time of the First World War, because the gardeners all went off to war, and a lot of the big houses had the gardens turned into vegetable plots.
Of course,
and
yeah.
the houses themselves were turned into hospitals, so gardening and things like peonies ceased to be an important thing.
Post-war, the lack of manpower saw British growers struggling, and American and Dutch breeders took over. We stopped exporting peonies and started to import.
What makes Kelway special is the peonies. They've been here since the 1850s, and we want them to be here for forever more, really, if we can. And the great thing with peonies is that you'll get more and more flowers every single year, and you see them getting bigger and bigger. I mean, they are plants that need a little bit of time to establish in the garden, which does put some people off, but once they're in, they're there forever.
And to hopefully preserve the rediscovered Bridal Veil forever. It's being relocated to the new collection in a more condensed area of the nursery.
We started planting this back in the autumn of last year, and we've got 150 varieties in here already, but my dream, Charlie, is to have 1,000 in here.
1,000? Fantastic.
How amazing would that be? The only important thing when planting a peony is that you don't plant it too deeply. You can see those little growth buds, which are the buds for next year.
Mm-hmm.
They want to be no more than about 5 centimetres below the soil surface. Right. Any deeper than that, and you'll get loads of lovely leaves, but you'll never get flowers. And it also gives rise to the myth that if you move a peony, it won't flower. If that were true, then we wouldn't be able to propagate these plants at all or sell them.
And it's just because someone's planted it too deep?
All it is. It's just all down to that planting depth. And get that right, and you'll never have a problem with moving your peonies or making them flower.
And you'll be labelling this one so that
I will indeed. It will be proudly labelled Bridal Veil.
And it's not lost.
It's not lost. It's back in the collection. We'll log it on the database, and next year I'll come back and inspect the flowers again.
Why do you think it's so important to have a collection like this?
It's just all part of the world's richness of flora and fauna, isn't it? Some of these plants exist nowhere else in the world but in this little field in the corner of Somerset, and I think that's really, really special.
So what do you think of my campaign to get people to put a peony in their garden?
I would love you to get more people to grow peonies. I think they're one of the best and most rewarding of all the garden plants.
Everyone's got to have a peony as far as I'm concerned in the garden.
I'm all for that. Or even 1,000 varieties like me.
With enthusiasts like Dave flying the flag for peonies, it can only help my campaign to get everyone growing them in their gardens. Peonies fall into 3 different categories, all with different characteristics, but perfect in any garden. Herbaceous peonies are the ones that most people recognise. They die right back down in the wintertime, and in the spring there's the flowers. You can get simple single ones right the way through to full-on double in a vast array of colours. And that's why they often feature as a cut flower in bouquets. Tree peonies flower much earlier than the herbaceous peonies, late spring, early summer. In actual fact, it's a large shrub, getting up to about 3 metres by 3 metres. And although they have flowers, they're not quite as full on as the herbaceous ones. But they do have these fantastic seed pods afterwards that look like court jester hats. The third group of peonies came about when a plant breeder in Japan crossed a tree peony with a herbaceous peony to give us what are called the intersectional peonies. They've got the structure of the tree peony and the lovely foliage, but they've also got the full-on glamorous flowers of the herbaceous peonies. Here at Kipsgate Court in the Cotswolds, peonies have been a feature plant since the first one was introduced into the garden in the 1930s, a legacy that has been passed down through 3 generations of women gardeners. I'm meeting Anne Chambers, who is carrying on her grandmother and mother's passion for peonies. Anne, how did the gardens develop here?
Well, my grandparents bought the house in 1918 after the First World War, and there wasn't really a garden at all here.
Anne's grandmother, Heather Muir, had no horticultural training, but nonetheless set to creating the garden.
She decided that she was going to lay out this top garden to begin with, and then set to on the very steep banks in the 1930s.
And from there, your mother took over?
Yes, my mum moved in the 1950s.
And you've kept it going?
Well, we moved here, yes, 30 years ago, and luckily for us, my mother was still going strong, so she taught us a lot.
It looks amazing. And have you always been peony enthusiasts?
Well, yes, we love peonies. They're very special.
And Anne has 3 special peonies to show me, planted by the 3 generations. The first was put in by her grandmother and had a long journey to get here. That's a climb, I have to say.
This is a tree peony that my grandmother brought back from China back in the 1930s.
So did she go out there?
No. In those days it came back by boat, so it took 6 months. I always think it looks rather in situ here. It could be on a hillside in the Himalayas or China with this sort of wooded area.
Definitely. Well, it's obviously finished flowering now.
Yes, absolutely. It flowered in May. It has wonderful big, those enormous saucer-shaped pink flowers, which are spectacular. Even when the flower's over, they're still pretty.
So how old's that then?
Nearly 90 years old.
Definitely worth the investment.
Quite, absolutely. Well, here we've got the lovely peony bowl of beauty.
One of the most popular ones, really, isn't it?
Absolutely, yes. I think most people do know it.
Beautiful pink guard petals and then the fantastic centre. They're known as Japanese peonies, aren't they, or imperial?
Absolutely. You've got a real month or 6 weeks, probably, of flowering, which is very good for a peony.
Yeah, and I mean, so spectacular. Was this you that put this in? Or?
No, this was my mother. So this one's been here, yes, probably since the 1960s.
So, Anne, you grew up here as a child. Do you remember the peonies?
As a child, you just take everything for granted. But I do remember that at this time of year, the roses and the peonies were very much a feature. And as a result, yes, we've planted lots of other new varieties as well.
And one of those varieties Anne planted 6 years ago. But this year is its first flower.
It's called Jan van Leuven. I don't know if my pronunciation's right. And I'd sort of forgotten about it. And then suddenly this year, this beautiful white flower.
Gorgeous. It's another Japanese single peony.
Yes, and a good leaf as well, don't you think?
Really nice.
Yes.
It's a real strong green, which contrasts fantastically with, the white of the flower.
I'm thrilled. Worth waiting for.
So, Anne, do you think I'm doing the right thing encouraging people to put peonies in their garden?
I do, because really they're very little bother. They don't get diseases, they disappear in the winter, they're totally hardy. I think they're a tremendous family, really, and there are so many different varieties.
Peonies will reward you with a lifetime of flowers, so it's worth investing in a plant. To try and get the public excited, I'm setting up pop-up peonies here in Bristol. With With my stall set, I call upon resident florist Lucy Manning to gain some insight into people's buying habits and to create some beautiful peony bouquets. Killy, love these ones. They are gorgeous, aren't they?
Together they look beautiful.
Are they popular?
They're kind of popular. I mean, actually, when I buy them, they look like this. So people just tend to kind of confuse them with other things.
Poppies and
Yeah,
roses,
poppies, yeah.
clematis maybe, double clematis.
Sometimes, even dahlias, actually, someone thought one was before.
Yeah. So, Lucy, what do you like about peonies?
I think what I really like is just watching them grow, really. And when you put them in a vase and they're in bud like this, and then you wake up in the morning and they've just opened, and yeah, and they just smell so good.
I have to say, in the garden, peonies have gone slightly out of fashion.
Yeah.
Are they like that in the floral arrangement?
Floral-wise, I think with weddings, they are quite a fashionable flower now. I'm doing a lot of weddings that are kind of corally, peach tones. So that's
that
kind of the
would be
fashion.
perfect.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm always recommending these only this time of year, though.
And price-wise, in comparison to roses?
Now they're in season, they're a good price. Come August, if a bride wants them, she might spend probably triple what she spends in around May.
And go on, I bet these all come in from abroad, don't they?
They do, that's the sad thing. Most of the flowers I do get are locally sourced, but with peonies, it's virtually impossible.
That's why I want to get everybody growing peonies in the garden.
Yeah.
I'm going to use Lucy's beautiful bouquets to grab people's attention, then hopefully convince them to buy a plant of their own. Hello there.
Hi.
It'll cost about the same as a bouquet, but you will reap the rewards and it will flower year after year. What would be most romantic, getting peonies from Sir or roses?
I want the red one.
You want the red one?
Yeah.
Would you buy a bouquet of flowers?
I would, they're absolutely beautiful.
I really want people to grow them, so I prefer you to buy a plant.
Okay.
And do you grow peonies at home?
Yes, I do, and I got two, and it was my grandfather's, so it's been going for 50 years. They're not as good as those, but they're not looking too bad.
The white one is really beautiful. Yeah, I spray that in my garden.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, it's getting to the end of the day. The market's closing down. I managed to get rid of half the peonies. I'm really pleased with the positive reaction my plants got. I think I've definitely helped raise the profile of this incredible flower. Peonies are not only beautiful plants, but they're one of the most robust as well, as the generations of plants here at Kifsgate Court have proven. I'm going to show you how simple it is to manage peonies at home. Tree peonies require very little in the way of maintenance, but what you may want to do is contain its size. This one here's got way too tall and it's hanging over the path. I'm going to take this one out to reduce the height and also the width. Always prune to a nice strong shoot or bud that's outward facing. Nice clean cut there. The other thing to remove is crossing stems. That way you keep the shrub nice and open and it lets air circulate through. So you can see this stem here is crossing right the way through the other upward stems. Again, always prune to a nice strong shoot. I'm doing this just after it's finished flowering, which is fine, but if you're doing major retraining, then you're best to wait until the autumn when the plant's gone dormant and most of the leaves have dropped off. Now this growth that's been taken back here will cause the side buds that are dormant at the moment to shoot next spring, and of course it's going to be covered in fabulous flowers in April-May. Unlike tree peonies, which happily grow without any additional support, some herbaceous varieties may need a helping hand by staking. Now, personally, I would choose ones that don't. Something like Pillow Talk that has lovely strong stems. But if you want to go for something like Sarah Bernhardt for cutting, then you will need to stake it. You could quite happily just use canes and twine, but I like to use these herbaceous supports. So all it consists of is a circle that's been divided up with supports, and then you've got 3 or 4 legs that hang off it, which you must make sure you get in position above the plant before it starts growing. Push it down into the ground, and as the foliage grows up, you can raise up the ring with it. As you can see from this peony here, you really don't notice the support at all, and all you're seeing is the lovely flowers. Someone who shares my love for peonies is Claire Austin. She's been growing them in her nursery garden on the Welsh borders since the 1980s and now has around 200 varieties. Now, I know you've got a passion for peonies, but where did that come from then?
It was really due to my father, who was he was breeding roses, but he didn't think they were going to hit the big time. So in the early 80s, he bought a large collection of peonies and irises and other perennials. And then the roses went wow, and he wasn't going to grow peonies anymore. So I took them over, and you can't resist a peony when it's in flower. They are just so beautiful. They add the wow to the border, and they're very easy to grow.
Through 30 years of growing peonies, Claire has built a collection of reliable and easy-to-maintain varieties, and it's the modern intersectional peonies that stand out. So the intersectionals, then?
Crosses between tree peonies and herbaceous peonies, and they make lovely, round, sturdy plants. Now, this plant is actually only a couple of years old, and the flowers will get bigger, like all peonies, as they age. This one's called Bartzella. It gets no disease, and in the autumn it just falls off very neatly. So you don't have to cut it back.
So there's no faffing around, cutting it back?
Self-supporting.
So would you recommend intersectionals for the average person?
Oh, absolutely, yes. And they may be a bit expensive at the moment, but they are going to get cheaper, and they come in such a lovely range of colours.
And why do you think they're so expensive? Is it just because demand outstrips supply?
They're very new in peony terms.
Right.
So a lot of peonies that might be cheaper may well have been introduced in the 1900s. This was only from the 1980s, 1990s.
OK, so that's
taking a lot of time to propagate them
on.
Yeah.
Are they not doing tissue culture with them?
They're starting to. There are certain ones and they're going to be cheaper, much cheaper.
And it's lovely and compact, isn't it?
And not only that, they're really easy to grow. Just plant them and leave them.
That's what we like.
Yeah, exactly.
One common complaint is the short flowering season, usually less than 3 weeks. But Claire thinks the intersectional peonies are key to overcoming this. So I suppose by having 2 or 3 of these different intersectional peonies in the garden, you're going to get quite a lot longer flowering periods.
That's right. They'll come in different heights as well. This one is particularly compact.
By growing intersectionals alongside herbaceous and tree peonies, Claire ensures she further extends the flowering period and has blooms from April through to June. So what would you recommend then in a herbaceous line?
Well, I think something like this Japanese peony, which is called cream puff. It's self-supporting.
So no staking. Once it's in, that's it.
That's right. It flowers for a good 10 days, 2 weeks, even 2.5 weeks. Each flower.
Yeah. Who's this
This is Crackles.
Hello, Crackles. Do you like the peonies? Do they smell nice,
I
mate?
think they've been eaten.
Yeah. Claire's collection is a fantastic array of colour, shape and height, with a long flowering period to boot. I can see why you've ended up with a field full.
Absolutely, there are so many, and they all flower at different times.
No one can say that there's not a peony for them.
I totally agree.
What I love love about this border at Kifsgate Court Gardens is the lovely palette of colour, from the dark blue of the pea-flowered baptisia, the soft pink of the ballerina rose, and the dark purple of the astrantia. But what still steals the show? The peony. And for a show-stopping peony of your own, here's how to plant a tree peony in your garden. Tree peonies are extremely hardy and not very demanding. Ideally, they'd like to be in partial shade, but they will put up with full shade as well and do okay. What you must remember is they're going to get large, so you make sure you give them the space because they're going to be there for a very long time. As with all plants, make sure you dig the hole big enough to get the whole of the root ball easily into the hole. So I'm just going to pop some bone meal at the bottom of the hole, which is really good for getting the roots established and the plant established and giving it a good boost. Now I've had this standing in water so that the root ball is nicely soaked, and it's a case of gently tapping it out of the pot. And there you can see we've got some really lovely, young, fibrous roots. Just want to make sure that you plant it slightly deeper than soil level. That way it'll give it more stability. And then just pop the soil back in. With all varieties of peony, if you buy them containerised like this one, they're happy to be planted at any time of the year. Now, tree peonies are hungry plants, and they really will benefit from a top dressing of fertiliser in the autumn, which will help initiate lots more lovely flowers in the spring. So firm it in, and of course give it a good water. Soak it well, that way the roots will start to grow downwards rather than come up to the surface, and you must keep on top of the watering for the next year or so. And don't worry if you don't get flowers in the first year. You just got to be patient, but I promise you it's well worth the wait. It's not just in gardens and vases where peonies stand out. Floral artist Rebecca Louise Law regularly uses them in her art installations of floral 3D sculptures and wall hangings.
I start all of my installations with flowers being fresh, and I allow them to dry.
Her most recent work is a private installation for a kitchen wall.
Within my artwork, I love peonies because they dry incredibly and they hold their colour. The technique I use is hanging the flowers within a space where it has enough air to be able to stop the decaying process. I get really excited when it's this season and I can use peonies and dry them. Peonies should definitely be revived, and people should really start to see the qualities in them, especially in the garden. Peonies are the best.
I couldn't agree more. For me, no other plant gives such a show-stopping performance as the peony. You can have flowers from spring right into summer, and they're glorious. And once they're in, you're going to have flowers year after year after year. Go on, splash out and put one in your garden, or maybe even two.
There's no doubt that Britain is a nation of very proud gardeners.
Our love of flowers and plants goes back centuries.
But there's a problem. Not everything is rosy in our gardens.
Our iconic plants are under attack from foreign invaders.
Ancient woodlands are at risk of being lost forever.
And our favourite flowers are disappearing right before our eyes.
So we need you to help us in our revival campaign.
We'll be inspiring you to dig deep and celebrate the best of British.
As we reveal the country's most stunning gardens.
And sharing our top gardening tips.
It's time to rediscover our passion for plants.
And breathe new life into our gardens.
We've been told for decades now that we all need to take responsibility for looking after the planet. And yet, one of the biggest tools we have to ensure a greener future is often overlooked. And it's right on our doorstep, the back garden. In our manic desire for ever-increasingly low-maintenance plots, we've chopped down trees, we've dug up borders and we've decked over lawns, when in fact, we should be viewing our gardens as the biggest nature reserves we have in the country.
On my revival, I'm finding out how simple wildlife gardening can be.
The way we're talking about it sounds like you've got to have all this knowledge and do all these things. You don't.
By learning how to choose nature over pesticides.
Encouraging beneficial insects in becomes easier than going for the zapper.
And planting beautiful flowers for our precious pollinators.
Really my favourite wildflower. These are cornflowers. You know, that really beautiful, bright blue flower that just looks fantastic in a meadow. This is the University of Bristol Botanic Garden, set on 4 wonderful acres on the edge of the city. It's buzzing with life, with bees and butterflies searching for nectar. There's a symphony of birds, and even the pond is teeming with frogs.
This environment is a shining example of what I like to call a wildlife